the other hand, if the mind gets caught and bogged down in other lesser pursuits, then you are bound to that. So these three concepts, the all-pervasive Brahman, the Atman in each human being, and the fourfold yoga joining the two. This is the first half of what I have to say. Each one, of course, can be expanded at great length, but I don't intend to do that here. And these are the three basic principles of the Vedanta. I will give you three more concepts that I think are now becoming increasingly important. Incidentally, the four yogas are not mutually exclusive. You don't have to follow either the one or the other. In the old days, you could go off into the caves. That is no longer possible. So you should combine it. Everybody, Dr. Datta, should be a Jnana Yogi. You should do some Jnana Yoga, some study. You should do some Bhakti Yoga, some devotion. You should do some Karma Yoga, which you are now doing by running this Asian conference. And you should do some Radha Yoga, even if it is simple breathing practice. All four yogas have to be brought together if we are going to really move onwards. Chareveti, the Veda tells us, if we do not move onwards, we get swept down. Because the current, the Yuga Dharma is such that it sweeps you down into the abyss. And therefore, if you want to go against the current, you have to mobilize all these forces and put them together in order, like the salmon goes back to its origin, despite the terrible difficulties it encounters. Similarly, if we are going to go back or go forward to our origins, then we have to get all these powers together. Now there are three more concepts that I put before you. The first is Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one, the wise call it by many names. It's from the Rig Veda. It's the most amazing statement because it says that all paths lead to the divine. We have got to accept multiple paths to the divine. There can be no sort of copyright on the divine. Nobody can say this is the only way you can get to the divine. How can you say that? The divine is luminous, all-encompassing. There are billions and billions of galaxies like ours. How do we know where consciousness has grown? How do we know in what way the divine has expressed itself? Who are we, tiny creatures on a speck of dust in the cosmos, to say that the divine can appear only at this time, only in this place, and only in this form? It's not acceptable any longer. I can say, okay, for me, my path is the best. But I cannot say that because you are not following that path, you can be blown up, or you can be killed, or tortured, or persecuted, or massacred. This is a very important point. Because religion has a mixed record in history. Remember that. It's a double-edged sword. Much that is great and noble in human civilization, architecture, we were talking about Vancouver and Thanjavur, architecture, art, literature, music, dance, can be traced back to one or other of the great religions of the world. And yet more people have been killed and massacred and tortured in the name of the divine than any other name. And the interesting thing is, everyone thinks that its divine is very compassionate. I worship Shiva, Karpur, Gauram, Karuna Avatar, the compassion of divinity. The Muslims start with Bismillah Rahman Rahim, the beneficent, the merciful. The Christians believe that Christ mounted the cross in order to atone for the sins of humanity. And yet in the name of these sort of religions, the most terrible things are done. What happens to that compassion? What happens to the compassion of Allah? What happens to the compassion of Shiva? What happens to the compassion of Christ? So therefore, the distortion of our religious teachings has wrought havoc in the world over the last 5,000 years. And unless we are able to transcend that, unless we are finally able to accept, not only tolerate other religions, but as Swami Vivekananda said, and we are celebrating his 150th birth anniversary this year, next year, not only tolerate, we have to accept that all paths lead to the divine. We've got to recognize that, and we've got to respect it. It is only when we do that that inter-religious strife will cease. And remember, friends, as long as there is strife between religions, there will be never be peace on Mother Earth. Even as I speak to you today, people are getting killed and blown up in the name of religion. Sometimes within the same religion, different sects fight with each other. So we've got to transcend that. And that is what the interfaith movement is all about. I've been involved, as you know, for 40 years in the interfaith movement. It began in 1893 in Chicago with the Parliament of the World Religions, where Swami Vivekananda made such a major dramatic impact. In the 20th century, a large number of interfaith organizations came into being, including the one that I had, the Temple of Understanding. We've had meetings around the world, but still this message of Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahuda Bhadanti has not yet permeated into human consciousness. And until it does that, they will not be free. That is why I say that the concepts of Vedanta are becoming more relevant, not less relevant. Because now we are a nuclear power. I presume your water got radioactive. Now we live in a nuclear age, and if any flare-up happens in the name of religion, it can be an absolute disaster. In fact, the way things were developing in Syria, we were afraid that it was going to be the beginning of another war. Maybe it's been postponed for the time being, but we've got to get over the religious differences. That is the fourth point I want to bring. The fifth point is the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world as a family. If you go to Parliament House, on the first gate, I'm not going to comment upon what happens within Parliament. वो तो आप देखते हैं television, I don't have to tell you about. But if you go to Parliament House, and on the first gate to the central hall is a beautiful shloka. Ayam nija paroveti gananam laguchetasam udar charitanam vasudhaiva kutumbakam. This is mine, that is yours, is a small and narrow way of looking at reality. For those of the higher consciousness, udar charitanam vasudha eva kutumbakam. The world itself is a family. It's a very extraordinary thing. If Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahuda Bhadanti is the cornerstone of the interfaith movement, then Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam has got to be the cornerstone of the globalization project. Because this concept thousands of years ago, our rishis realized that in the final analysis, the human race is a family. It is only now you can pick up a small machine and you can dial some numbers and your voice gets bounced off a satellite and goes on immediately to America or to California. These technologies were not available. Now they are available. So the possibility of becoming a single family, the technological possibilities have emerged only in our lifetimes. I remember when we were children, there was no television. If you tell youngsters today that the human race existed reasonably happily without television for 5,000 years, they won't believe you. Because for them, television is the end-all and be-all of existence. But all this happened in our own lifetimes. It is happening every day. So technology has given us the means of becoming a global society. But we don't have the wisdom. We have the knowledge, we don't have the wisdom. Always remember, first of all, there is this tsunami of information. From information, you've got to extract knowledge, and from knowledge then, you've got to develop wisdom. So although we have the knowledge, we do not have the wisdom. We are still stuck in pre-global, pre-nuclear attitudes. And 200 different nation states around the world, every state says, I am mine, I am right, not realizing that we are all tiny specks on planet Earth.